And a happy Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Couple things to go over before we dive into your forecast, which once again is really going to be uneventful. We do have a bit of a roller coaster ride when it comes to your temperatures once again, and that's going to be pretty typical for the spring season as you're kind of transitioning out of a cooler time of the year into a warmer time of the year. Typically, when you have a weather system that comes through and maybe tries to knock the numbers back down, it is going to result in maybe a feel of two different seasons on occasion, depending on when you are walking out the door or throughout the afternoons, where they could be feeling nice and spring-like, or they could be even feeling summer-like we did see over the course of this past weekend. So first things first, as of last Friday, we did get a report of another confirmed tornado. This brings our total for March 12th, which was going to be about a week and a half ago, up to 9 confirmed tornadoes. That does classify as a tornado outbreak. Typically, you need around 6 or more tornadoes over the course of the same severe weather system coming through in order to classify as a tornado outbreak. And this one in Twiggs County, I'm surprised it took this long to get confirmed, to be honest, because when we were doing coverage throughout that morning, this tornado warned storm did come with an observed on the ground tag. But this has been the most recent update to now 12 confirmed tornadoes in central Georgia over the course of the last week and a half. And it was a pretty strong one as well. EF1 tornado with 105-mile-per-hour winds. It touched down right around the I-16 corridor, made its way kind of down to the east and the southeast, close to the Green Road area. That's where it did sprout some damage just off I-16. And then you go over to Highway 96 as it does cross over our I-16 rather, I should say. And then as it continued over to the east, where it did its most amount of damage is where you're going to see a lot of these green triangles right over here. But the gray triangles are more the blue color. That's going to be EF0 damage, and then the green color is going to be EF1 damage, which it did its fair share of over at the intersection of, I believe this is Missile Base Road and Prospect Church Road, and it continued over towards the east, towards, I believe that is Tommy Thompson Road right over there, and then it did dissipate. So it was on the ground for about 4 minutes, not too long, about 3¼ of a mile for that actual track. But once again, doing its fair share of damage over here right around the Prospect Church Road area, and that is going to be just off the Highway 96 area off I-16 in Twiggs County. So like I said, that does now bring our total from March 12th and March 16th up to 12 confirmed tornadoes. 1 up in Baldwin, 1 up in Monroe County, 2 in Upson County, 2 also up here in Bibb County, 1 now in Twiggs, following over to directly over to the east of what we saw on Peach and Houston County lines, and then right over there in Macon County with the asterisk, that is just indicating that that was the strongest in nature. And I wouldn't even doubt that this rotation of this tornado that sprouted down in Twiggs County was maybe the same rotation that we saw all the way back into Peach and Houston and originally back into northern Macon County. We do know that the Macon County rotation did touch back down on the Peach and Houston County line, but I wouldn't doubt that that same area of that line of storms that continue to push over to the east also touched down this tornado over in Twiggs County. Another confirmed tornado down in Dooley County, right to the east of I-75. And then we saw 2 in Lawrence County, 1 closer to the downtown Dublin corridor, right along I-16. And then we saw 1 that was just over to the east of Brent's, a little bit farther to the south in Lawrence County. And your drought monitor. If you did miss the latest update as of last week, you didn't miss much. We didn't really see much change whatsoever with some of these abnormally dry, moderate drought, severe, or even extreme drought areas. If anything, the most noticeable change that I saw was this area of an abnormally dry conditions. Around central Washington County, it did expand a little bit over to the west into portions of Baldwin County, including the Milledgeville area. So most areas in northern central Georgia, I would say you guys don't need the rain quite as much as areas like over to the west and down to the southeast that do find themselves in a severe and an extreme drought. But with the lack of rainfall recently and the lack of rainfall that we look to have ahead for the next 7 days, I do anticipate a lot of these drought conditions to continue to worsen. So the month of March has definitely not been a wet one by any means. We've recorded rainfall. I believe this is going to be 6 days out of the month so far, and they all really came within a span from the 8th all the way to the 16th. So this is basically over the course of a week where we did record pretty much all of our rainfall for the month of March, and at the very most, it might have gotten us back flirting with the near normal category, but now we've hit a stretch of, I believe, 6 days in a row without recording rainfall. So we are now entering the very dry category, which once again, we have been on the bottom half of this graphic for each month in 2026 so far. Just over 1.5 inches of rainfall recorded for the month of March. And on average, we typically see just under 5 inches of rainfall for the month of March. So obviously one of our wetter months in the calendar year, maybe not quite as wet as what we see in July, August, getting into some of those late summertime months, those early spring or early fall months. However, we're definitely looking to fall short of our average total and definitely very far short of that record set back in 1944 of over a foot of some rain. So beginning of the weekend, rain chances. They do look a little bit more impressive than what we saw as of late last week, but the temperatures, they will continue to be a roller coaster, and I think this is the main thing you need to focus on because your rain chances only going to impact a select few spots. The temperatures are going to impact everyone here in central Georgia. We are going to be drier as we head towards the weekend compared to these very low rain chances that we see for the beginning of the work week. So let's break it down in full detail about how to plan out maybe your spring break week this week, maybe any plans to go to the Cherry Blossom Festival, and also just any other general festivals that you're checking out as we're now kind of entering the very beginning of spring, but I would classify it as kind of the thick of spring. Once we get into the month of April, I guess that's really where spring is in full bloom with things like the Masters, all those flowers popping out. But we've gotten a bit of an early start to spring, which you'll actually want to tune in later on during our evening shows from meteorologist Ansley Parker breaking that down about how our weather over the last 6 weeks has compared to the groundhog's prediction. Bit of a spoiler alert, I think the rodent was dead wrong. Here's a look around the quad where we see plenty of blue in the sky, maybe a few upper level clouds. I feel like I say that each and every day. But let's take a look down here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, which, hey, for a change, our Skycam actually looks to be working. We can see that the flags are kind of generally coming back at us in the screen, which is indicating a bit of a westerly direction with your winds as we are facing over to the west, indicated by the big W that you see right here in the grass and the bushes right there by the west gate at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. So here's a look at your temperatures all across the eastern half of the United States, and you can start to see where a boundary is settling in. There's a lot of blue, light blue, and dark blue up behind a frontal boundary, but down here still out ahead of the front, we are noticing some warmer and some slightly more humid air, I would imagine, with some temperatures that are scattered about the 60s and the 70s, but those transition into the 50s and the 40s, even the 30s the farther north that you travel. 35 for the coolest temperature that I spot up in Kansas City. And then we're starting to see some mid 70s here in the southeast. And it does look like 78, I believe, in Charleston. That's a new location to actually claim the warmest temperature here at 11 a.m., but it is a little bit more humid and a little bit warmer in these areas over in the southeast quadrant of the United States compared to areas like, say, you see back over into Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, some of those areas that typically are running a lot warmer than the rest of the bunch, and including the Florida area. 79 actually for the warmest temperature if we go a bit more localized here. That's all the way up in Columbia. 74 in Macon, a good mix of those 60s and 70s, but predominantly the 70s on your current temperature map. But we can begin to see some of that cooler air filtering in, indicated by that 56 that you spot all the way up into northern Alabama in the Huntsville area. Now let's get into your current temperatures here in central Georgia. One lone upper 60, and that remains over in Taylor County. Everyone else already in the low 70s, in the mid 70s, 75 at the warmest in Milledgeville, Warner Robins. Don't think I see any temperatures warmer than that. So that number is definitely already up there and already above your average high temperature, which sits at 72 degrees for this time of year. So we still have a good amount of warming to do as we head well into the afternoon, but something that has been a factor also all morning long, and we were talking about these to get a bit of a pickup as we head into the afternoon, that is going to be the breeze. So throughout most of this morning, the breeze has been coming from the general westerly direction, maybe even a little bit down to the southwest. Well, we've seen a steady tilt in these wind arrows to where they're now beginning to come out of the west and the northwest, because an approaching frontal boundary is going to change the direction that your breeze does come through for the remainder of today. But what you need to focus on right now is going to be the magnitude of these winds, and I would say anywhere from around a 5 to a 15 mile per hour sustained breeze. That's what the winds are consistently blowing at. However, that number in yellow over to the right of all these locations, that's your occasional gust. So that's not what the winds are blowing at continuously. That's where the winds are just going to be a bit gustier for just a brief couple of moments. And that's where we see some gusts up to 21, 22, even 23 miles per hour across certain locations of central Georgia. Some areas not necessarily picking up on those gusts right now, but each time that you get an update to this graphic, you're very likely going to watch that yellow number pop up. So Dublin, Cochrane, over to Swainsboro, Americus. I imagine once we get another update to this graphic, it would pop up a gust, say, to 17, 18, maybe even 22 or 23 miles per hour. Here's a look at your humidity levels, which are also painting the picture about where our frontal boundary is settled in, because we can see that the drier air is trying to filter in where it's pushing all of this light green eventually out of the picture down to the south and the southeast, but we're still continuing to keep it here in most of central Georgia, especially down in South Georgia. So we are watching this frontal boundary creep into the northern portion of the state, and it's already making its presence known in areas like Huntsville, creeping into Birmingham, all the way up in Oxford, Mississippi, but areas like Macon, Columbus, Albany, down to Mobile, Panama City, and even over into Charleston, where it is a bit patchy in terms of your humidity levels over here, but it is going to be a warm environment because they've had their fair share of sunshine a little bit earlier than the rest of the bunch. Farther east that you are, that's where you do get more sunshine in the forecast a bit earlier, maybe just a couple of minutes. It can make all the difference with the warming trend, especially given how warm we have been lately. Here's a look at your satellite imagery. Not much going on. There are some clouds up to the north of us, however, which we can take a zoomed out picture. And like we were just talking about, frontal boundary coming through, drier air up there behind it, some cooler temperatures up there behind it. But what you're not seeing, that this frontal boundary that is beginning to drive through, unlike our last couple of ones, are widespread showers right there on the leading edge of it. So as this front continues to drive through, are we going to have moisture? Are we going to have a conducive environment for some widespread showers, maybe something in the way of storms? The short answer is no, but we're not looking at much really in the way of a noticeably humid environment. We had some light green there in the forecast, but our temperatures are not going to be necessarily too warm in order to sprout something in the way of those widespread rain chances. This is going to be what we like to call one of those dry frontal boundaries that really only passing cloud cover is only indication that it is making its way through. So before we talk about the impacts from that frontal boundary and maybe which areas could luck out and see a shower today, let's focus on some numbers. 55 to start out Sunday morning, and then an increase up of 30 degrees all the way up to 85 as we round out the afternoon yesterday. 85, 13 degrees above average, 55 going to be 9 degrees above your average low. So definitely continuing the above average trend. Not quite record breaking, but 91 set back in 1907. Very thankfully we didn't make that push towards the 90-degree mark. However, your year departure, this is something we kind of just typically skim by day. Take a look at how far it continues to go down into the negatives. Around 4 inches below where we should be at this point in 2026. So yes, the dry weather is going to be very opportune for some outdoor plans, not having to duck and dodge a shower or even a storm in the forecast for anything that you have planned, whether it's Cherry Blossom Festival or any of those other festivities we were talking about. However, we do definitely need some rain. We're getting into the point where we're about 3 full months into the year. We are almost done with Q1 for 2026, and we definitely need some rain. It has been a dry stretch for January, February, and now into the month of March. So hopefully we can start to kick back into gear and get more, maybe even some of those severe weather makers, hopefully without the severe weather, of course, but we definitely need the rainfall that a lot of those frontal boundaries and a lot of these weather systems are going to bring in over the course of the next couple of months. Sunrise, 7:36 yesterday, and your sunset was at 7:48. I want to circle back to your high temperatures just to reiterate that not only has March been a dry month, but it has been an above average month. You can see which box of these here on the bottom right of this graphic are definitely skewed one way or the other. Above average days, we have seen over triple the amount of above average high temperatures as opposed to the below average high temperatures, which we had a decent stretch of over the course of your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even into Thursday. 70 degrees doesn't really feel like below average, but in fact, it was just 1 degree below average of 71 last Thursday. I would anticipate that maybe we have 1 or 2 of these in store over the course of the work week this week. However, it's not going to be a very prolonged stretch of some blue like we did see last week. That was a very substantial cool down that we saw, and we are going to see some cool downs over the coming days. but not going to be to the degree of what we saw last week that sprouted some freeze warnings and even a frost advisory. We had 2 mornings in a row with a freeze warning, and then the third day after that, we had a frost warning indicating some numbers that got really close or even below that 32-degree mark, which we typically shouldn't be doing once we get into the month of March, but it can happen. Like I said, spring season, you see a lot of temperature fluctuation when frontal boundaries do make their way through. So here's a look at your hour-by-hour warm-up the next couple of hours. 83 peaking around 3, 4, 5 o'clock, and then we begin the cool down as we go closer into the evening around that 6 p.m. hour. I think that 83 is once again undershooting it like this graphic has been doing as of recently. So 85, that's my forecasted high temperature, exactly what we hit Sunday afternoon. 13 degrees above average, but you are going to pair up 85 with some mostly sunny skies, number one, and some breezy conditions. While yes, the winds may not have felt the best as you walked out the door this morning, when you have some warm temperatures, I promise you, even a gust up to 25 miles per hour, that is going to feel mighty nice throughout the rest of today. So it's really just going to kind of be a textbook spring forecast and a forecast you definitely want to maximize your time outdoors if you can throughout today. So breezy and mostly dry. I'd say that forecast is going to be for about 95% of central Georgia. And at the end of it all, it very well might be for all of central Georgia, 100% of the area. But there is a very slim chance that I do want to talk about for maybe an evening shower or two, and that is going to be down in our southeastern corner. Before we show you that on Future View, let's just go over a little bit, because once again, I'm going to show this for probably about the next 3, maybe even 4 months, because I want to continue to reiterate. Not only should you be taking care of yourself when these temperatures get warmer, making sure that you're hydrating, making sure that you're putting on your sunscreen, or maybe if you're more sensitive to the sun, maybe wearing some layers or at least a pullover to shade yourself a little bit. But make sure that you're helping out your furry friends as well. I saw a lot of dogs out there at Cherry Blossom Festival this weekend, and obviously when you have temperatures even in the mid-80s, they don't necessarily feel as bad as, say, 90 or 95, but the concrete and asphalt temperature can already get into the triple digits. If you have an air temperature of 85 degrees, which is my forecasted high for today, 105 degrees is roughly the temperature of what the concrete is, and then the asphalt temperature going to be even warmer at 130 degrees roughly, because asphalt is darker, it absorbs a lot more heat from that solar radiation as opposed to the lighter color of concrete. But nonetheless, if you wouldn't want yourself walking around barefoot on surfaces this hot, then your furry friends definitely don't as well. So make sure that you're trying to find some grassy areas for them, making sure that you have that portable dog bowl or portable cat bowl if you're walking your cat out this afternoon, just to make sure they're staying hydrated, but also try to keep their paws off some of those hot surfaces. If they are going to be walking on some of those hot surfaces, make sure that they do have some form of insulation, whether they're little booties or maybe just going into the dog diving tank that we do have set up right now in downtown Macon. I think that's a great way for the dogs and your furry friends to cool down. But speaking of your high temperatures as well, right now our average high temperature sits at 72 and your average morning low is going to be somewhere around 46 degrees. Well, we are almost at the end of the month and we still have a little bit of warming to do. By the time we wrap up the month of March, this time next week, 74 going to be your average high and 48 going to be your average low. And then you can take a look at that sunrise and sunset time on March 31st, going to be at 7:23. And then your sunset is going to be almost at 8 p.m., 7:54 p.m. on the last day of the month, which will be, I believe it's next Tuesday, if my math is correct. Today's the 23rd, 7 days from now going to be the 30th, and then March 31st going to be next Tuesday. And then next Wednesday, consider this your reminder, April Fool's Day. Do not get fooled by one of those jokes. I'm sure I will probably forget myself and I'm going to fall for 1 or 2 of those at work here. But nonetheless, let's talk about your surface map where we do see this frontal boundary beginning to drive in, attached to this low pressure center, which all in all is just a very elongated boundary that is settling in and moving across the southeast United States. You can see those winds coming in from a northerly direction behind it, and then you can start to see where those winds are moving off over from west to east ahead of this frontal boundary. So I think it's creeped up a little bit farther down to the south than where I drew it as of about an hour ago. But nonetheless, it is indicated by this thin cloud cover that moves throughout the rest of the afternoon, still keeping those breezy conditions in, whether they're coming in from the west or they're coming in from the northwest. But as we go into the evening, more so the nighttime hours, that's where we could start to see a couple of showers. I wouldn't even doubt a rumble of thunder or two. bubble up ahead of this frontal boundary. But the last couple of model runs have not been confident in popping up any of these shower chances anywhere here in central Georgia. The chances have been a lot greater over towards Savannah, over along the state line of Georgia and South Carolina, all the way over to the Charleston area. So those are where the rain chances are going to be a lot better. However, if we do see anyone catch a stray shower during mainly the nighttime hours, I mean, take a look at this timestamp. 9 p.m., you're probably already getting ready to call it a night. Well, that would be southeast central Georgia. So Soperton, maybe getting down to Alamo, McRae, Vidalia, all those areas on the far eastern quadrant of I-16 and the far southeastern quadrant of central Georgia. That's where you are going to have the greatest chance of maybe a pop-up shower. It's going to be very brief, it's going to be very short-lived, and it's going to happen during the nighttime hours, past sunset, so I really don't think it's going to be much of a concern for you. Don't be alarmed if you do hear a rumble of thunder. We're not forecasting anything in the way of severe weather with maybe one of those that does try to intensify a little bit more. And consider yourself lucky if you hear a rumble of thunder, because that means you're going to have some heavy rainfall rates associated with that thunderstorm, and that is going to dump its fair share of rain over a localized area. You're going to be one of the only people here in central Georgia that maybe gets a car wash from that and washes all of that pesky pollen off your windshield and off your hood. Now we go all the way into tomorrow morning. Notice this shift in the winds coming in out of the north and the northeast now. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a second. But you can see that cloud cover is kind of on and off throughout the morning hours tomorrow. And then as we go into the afternoon, starting to see that cloud cover build in a bit denser in nature. And then as we go into the evening hours, this model run of Future View is not showing anything, but we were looking at more widespread rain chances to build in. Absolutely nothing for this last model run of Future View. So I wouldn't be surprised that we are going to have a smaller scale system that does try to move through as we go into Tuesday evening all the way into Wednesday morning. Obviously, you just didn't see anything right there, but that was just what one model run does say. I'm still banking on starting to see maybe some widespread rain chances in the later hours of Tuesday, more so the nighttime and overnight time frame, where a few sprinkles could still greet you out the door on Wednesday. But as we go into the afternoon on Wednesday, I expect those rain chances to taper off, and soon enough that cloud cover is going to follow suit, and then we'll head overnight into early Thursday morning and hopefully have some clear skies to walk out the door to once again on your Thursday morning. Here's a look at the breezy conditions. Those will continue to train on throughout the rest of your Monday, and then as we go into tomorrow morning, we're still going to notice a pretty significant breeze as a matter of fact. How about this? Gusts up to 20, 25, maybe even 30 miles per hour. But I did mention they're coming out of the north and the northeast as we go into tomorrow, which is normally indicative of a wedge setup. And you'll see that on the current temperatures, maybe if I pop that graphic up or not. But nonetheless, we'll talk about what influence it has on the forecast as well. Going into your Tuesday afternoon and evening, still a tad bit breezy, but it's mainly a light breeze. That's what we typically talk about when we see these blue colors. And I expect it to begin to subside as we go into the beginning of the midweek on Wednesday, or right smack dab in the middle of the midweek, rather, I should say. So next 3 days, 85 degrees. I guess I forgot to change this graphic. I meant to put the cherry blossom graphic on here. So obviously not the first day of spring. That was as of last Friday when we last edited this graphic. But 85 for a high temperature. That goes down into the upper 60s for both Tuesday and Wednesday, and as you're walking out the door on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings. 50 degrees, 45 degrees. Yes, it's not substantially cold. It's not like the low 30s we were talking about last week. However, it is going to be on the chillier side of things, something you'll very likely want at least some light layering for as you walk out the door, and then you will head into an afternoon that is going to be below average, but still in the upper 60s. Not going to be a bad thing whatsoever, but we are going to be cooler because of two things. Number one, because the passage of our frontal boundary, and also that wedge setup that is kind of reinforcing the cooler air that we're feeling, kind of funneling in from the north and the northeast. Obviously, my rain chances are definitely overestimating it, especially compared to the last model run. We may backtrack these as we go closer and closer, but if we don't see a 40% chance of rain on Tuesday, maybe not even a 30% chance of rain on Wednesday, consider it a best case scenario for not having rain to interrupt any portion of your daily routine. However, with the absence of this rain, even with this slight cool down on Tuesday and Wednesday, number one, pay attention to how quickly we warm back up. Thursday and Friday, 81 for a high, and then 87 as we go into Friday afternoon. Right now, Friday is looking like it may be the warmest day of 2026 so far. I wouldn't be surprised if this number maybe starts to get a bit of an uptick on the next couple of model runs and maybe even makes a push towards 90. But when we have some warmer temperatures and we have the absence of a lot of rain chances, that is going to create a ripe environment for the pollen just to run rampant. And that's what you should expect over the course of this week. If you haven't really necessarily had too many allergy problems as of recently, like myself, you are going to want to make sure that you are taking your allergy medication this week, because this is looking to be one of the worst weeks so far that we've had in terms of the pollen count, specifically tree and a little bit of grass pollen. But the tree pollen is looking like it's going to be kind of the main driver of all those allergy symptoms this week. Morning low temperatures, they start to have a bit of a chill to them throughout the midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but then they're back into that comfortable range as we go and kickstart your Friday morning with a morning low of 56 degrees, which is 10 degrees above your average of 46. So this cool down that we're seeing, it's really just knocking the numbers back to around average. We're a little bit more below average on the high temperature side of things as opposed to the morning low. But once we go into the weekend, like I mentioned, we see that warm up very quickly, Thursday all the way into Friday. Thursday, no rain chances that I can spot. We start to see a frontal boundary to the north of us later on Friday afternoon into the evening, but that's a couple states to the north of us. That will continue to drive down into the southeast. But once again, we just don't really have the environment that is going to produce some widespread rain chances here in central Georgia. So Friday into Saturday, we will see the passage of another frontal boundary, and that is going to keep the temperatures in check. That's going to usher in another slightly cooler air mass behind it, but it's not going to result in widespread rain chances. In fact, we are just going to head into the entire course of the weekend ahead on a dry note, which is great for Cherry Blossom Festival. I mean, I can't even remember the last time that we've had a full about 10 days of Cherry Blossom Festival with little to no rain chances whatsoever. There's normally at least 1, 2, maybe even 3 days out of Cherry Blossom Festival that are just kind of washouts, and you have to plan accordingly to find those dry days where you can get out and enjoy it. But take a look at this. And like I mentioned, your rain chances for Tuesday and Wednesday, I think I definitely overshot them a little bit, just judging it off one model run that I did see this morning. I know I always tell you we don't base things on one model run. I need to kind of give myself a flick on the neck for that because I kind of disobeyed my own rule on that. But 81 degrees for a high on Thursday after 2 days in the upper 60s. And I promise you the afternoons are not going to feel too chilly, but it's really the morning hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, even all the way into Thursday, where we will still be below the 50-degree mark. And I wouldn't doubt that we're actually going to see the temperatures drop a little bit lower than that. Some of the models are calling for some lower numbers, so I think we'll actually feel a little bit more of that chill in the morning hours like we typically do see with the passage of these frontal boundaries. But hey, if it's a little too hot for your liking here in central Georgia, take a trip up I-75. The Braves are going to be kicking off the 2026 MLB season against the Kansas City Royals up at Truist Park. Not to say that it's not going to be as warm up there. I imagine the highs in Atlanta are probably going to be around 84 or 85, but maybe not necessarily the upper 80s and pushing 90 like we'll see down here. And if it is too warm for your liking, I have great news for you. 75 for a high temperature on Saturday, and then back into the upper 60s, or right there around 70 degrees on Sunday. Note your morning low. That is going to be quite chilly as you walk out the door for church on Sunday, but obviously not too substantial of a cool down because we're not going to see those low 30s, those upper 20s like we did see in the mornings as of last week. And we're not talking about high temperatures that'll be in the 50s maybe throughout the afternoon. So kind of the best of both worlds. A little bit of a cool down just to keep the numbers in check and prevent them from making that climb to the 90-degree mark. Hopefully, fingers crossed that we don't see that 87 go any higher. However, it will be very short-lived even if we do make that push to the 90-degree mark on your Friday afternoon. Until then, I think Tuesday evening into early Wednesday for that morning commute time, you may just want to have the rain jacket ready to go. In all likelihood, it's looking less and less likely that you're going to see anything in the way of rain. A very quiet forecast, besides just a lot of up and down in the temperature department. A bit of a roller coaster ride, but make sure that you are enjoying those more pleasant feeling days. Whether your interpretation of pleasant is going to be highs in the upper 60s or maybe highs in the lower half of the 80s, maybe even pushing 90. I know Megan Western is going to be ecstatic about Friday afternoon's high temperature. But nonetheless, still a relatively quiet week and very fortunate that it is correlating with the Cherry Blossom Festival. And hopefully next week we can pick back up with those rain chances because we definitely do need our fair share of some rain throughout the month of April to hopefully put us back near average and hopefully at least provide a little bit of relief for those drought conditions that have continued to settle in. So that's going to do it for your extended forecast here this Monday. We'll be back once again tomorrow at 11 a.m. for a better look at the rain chances Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. I think we'll have a lot better data as we go into the morning hours tomorrow to break that down for you. But again, just have the rain jacket ready to go in case you need it. If you don't, no worries at all. Soak up some sunshine that we do have for the back half of the 7-day.